What if your own mind became the prison you couldn't escape? Not a cell with walls and bars, but a sentence passed by your own conscience. In Dostoyevsky's Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov doesn't just commit a murder, he wages war against his own psyche. This is not just a story about crime. It's about the unbearable weight of guilt, the lies we tell ourselves to justify the unforgivable, and the psychological descent that follows. But it's not just his story. It's ours. Every time we silence the voice inside us, compromise our values, or rationalize something we know feels wrong, we step into our own version of that prison. Welcome to Marked in the Margins, a cinematic space for quiet thinkers, deep feelers, and those seeking self-reflection and personal growth through great literature. Our goal is to use literary analysis as a mirror, helping you better understand yourself one story at a time. If this kind of reflection resonates with you, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with someone else who loves to think deeply. A quick primer. What is Crime and Punishment about? For those who haven't read it, Crime and Punishment follows a young man named Raskolnikov, a former student living in poverty in 19th century St. Petersburg. He becomes obsessed with an idea that certain extraordinary people have the moral right to commit crimes if it means benefiting humanity. Acting on this theory, he murders a pawnbroker, and that decision sets off a deep and torturous psychological unravelling. Today we're diving deep into the torment of Raskolnikov's mind, unpacking guilt, morality, ego, and how Dostoyevsky's psychological portrait helps us understand our own inner struggles.
So, how does someone end up trapped in their own psyche like that?
Well, it's fascinating because Raskolnikov doesn't just snap and commit murder. He actually builds this elaborate philosophical framework first. He spends months developing this theory that certain exceptional people have the right to commit crimes if it serves some greater good.
So he's basically trying to intellectualize his way into justifying murder?
Exactly. And you know what's really interesting? Studies show that this kind of moral self-licensing is incredibly common. When people convince themselves they're doing something wrong for the right reasons, they actually experience less guilt initially.
Oh, wow. That explains why he's so calm right after the murder, doesn't it?
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. That initial calm completely shatters. The actual murder is nothing like his philosophical fantasy. It's messy, chaotic, and then comes the moment that undoes it all. The pawnbroker's innocent sister walks in, and she's nothing like the woman Raskolnikov had convinced himself deserved to die. Where the pawnbroker is cold and cruel, her sister is gentle, vulnerable. A living contradiction to his theory. Have you noticed how, up until that point, it's disturbingly easy to sit with Raskolnikov's logic? We may not agree with him, but we understand him, maybe even tolerate it. And then, this young innocent girl appears, and suddenly the quiet approval we didn't know we were giving feels unbearable. The spell breaks. It's not just his illusion that collapses, it's ours. That's the brilliance of Dostoyevsky. He doesn't just indict the character, he puts the reader on trial too.
That moment, when theory meets reality, must be absolutely devastating. Like watching a house of cards collapse.
And that's when the real psychological torture begins. You know, Dostoyevsky actually spent 4 years in a Siberian prison camp himself, so he understood psychological imprisonment firsthand. The way he describes Raskolnikov's mental deterioration is just, well, it's chillingly accurate.
Tell me more about how that manifests. What actually happens to him?
So he develops these intense symptoms: fever dreams, paranoid wandering, complete social isolation. Modern psychiatrists have actually studied this book because it's such an accurate portrayal of what we now call acute stress response and post-traumatic stress.
That's fascinating. So Dostoevsky was basically documenting PTSD before it was even recognized as a condition.
Exactly. And what's really brilliant is how he shows Raskolnikov's ego becoming both his shield and his torture device. The more he tries to justify what he did, the more his mind fractures. It's like watching someone dig their own grave with increasingly sophisticated tools.
You know what's really striking about that? How universal that pattern is. Maybe not with murder, but with any time we try to outsmart our own conscience.
That's precisely why this book still hits so hard today. Studies show that cognitive dissonance, that mental stress we feel when our actions don't align with our values, actually creates measurable physical stress responses in the body. Have you ever convinced yourself something was right, just to avoid feeling guilty? What was it? Drop it in the comments. You're not alone here.
So, in a way, Raskolnikov's physical symptoms are really just an extreme version of what happens to all of us when we betray our own values.
And then there's Sonia, this incredible character who represents everything Raskolnikov tried to reject: compassion, humility, the acceptance of suffering. She's like this living embodiment of the conscience he's trying to silence.
The relationship between them is fascinating. Here's this young woman who suffered immensely herself, yet she has this profound moral clarity that cuts through all his intellectual defenses.
You know what's really powerful about their dynamic? Research shows that genuine human connection is one of the most effective antidotes to psychological trauma. Sonia becomes like this bridge back to his humanity.
But it's not an easy journey back, is it? Even after he confesses, there's no magical moment of redemption.
Not at all. And that's what makes it so real. Even in Siberia, his transformation is slow, painful, incomplete. And yet something does begin to shift. In exile with Sonia by his side, Raskolnikov starts to feel again. Not instantly, but gradually. He opens his heart to suffering. And in that surrender, something resembling redemption begins. Dostoyevsky doesn't give us a fairy tale ending, but he offers a quiet miracle. A man who once saw himself above humanity begins to see himself within it. And that's where hope lives. Not in erasing the past, but in choosing to become someone new.
So, what's the ultimate message here? That we can't outsmart our own humanity?
Well, I think it's even deeper than that. Dostoyevsky seems to be suggesting that our conscience isn't just some annoying voice we can silence. It's actually trying to protect us from ourselves. The more Raskolnikov tries to suppress it, the more violently it resurfaces.
That's such a profound insight about human nature. The very thing he thought would free him ended up being his prison.
And maybe that's the real warning in this story. That the greatest punishment isn't what society does to us, but what we do to ourselves when we try to live with a divided soul. Modern psychology backs this up. Moral injury, as they call it, can be more damaging than physical trauma.
It's heavy stuff, but also strangely hopeful in a way. If someone can find their way back from actual murder,
Then maybe there's hope for all of us dealing with our own smaller betrayals and compromises. You know, research shows that acceptance and accountability are actually more healing than self-punishment. Maybe that's what Raskolnikov finally learns. Not to outsmart his conscience, but to listen to it. If you found something in this story that made you pause, reflect, or feel understood, you're not alone. That's what we do here. Every week on Marked in the Margins, we dive into literature not as critics, but as fellow seekers, trying to understand life, one story at a time. So if that speaks to you, then please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks deeply too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep listening to the voice inside. It knows the way home.